Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to make a MAUI application. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio. And create a new project. And select MAUI here, C# MAUI. And there's several different options here. We're going to make a basic MAUI application. There's also MAUI Blazor hybrid app and some other options here for libraries. We're going to pick a .NET MAUI app. This will be using Xamarin instead of Blazor, or XAML, I'm sorry, instead of Blazor. And I'm going to call it To Do. And it's going to be a to-do application. I'm going to be doing this with .NET 8 long-term support version. And here we are with our .NET MAUI app. So let's take a look at the application to begin with. I'm going to run it on a Windows machine. And this is our app. It works right out of the box. It gives you a little bit of functionality just to kind of demonstrate what it does. But this is the Windows version. So the nice thing about MAUI is that it not only allows you to build a Windows application, you can also build an Android, an iOS, a Mac, a number of different types of applications. So we say this is a cross-platform development framework. You can see here the platforms that it's supporting right now. And if we look at the project, right now what we have is our main starting app, our builder essentially. It's a builder. It gives you the MAUI app library gives you a create builder method, and that builder actually builds your app for you. The main page is described using a language called XAML. It's an XML format that basically provides us, very similar to HTML, provides us a number of tags that can be used to create the things we want on our form. So we describe the form with the XAML, and then there's a code behind page, which is where we put the code that responds to events on our XAML page. So for example, here we notice that when we click that button, it updated a count variable. Here's that count variable. Here's where we have code that increments the count and updates that count. And notice here we have an initialize component method. If you've come here from doing Windows Forms or any other Windows applications, there's usually an initialize component method. This initialize component method is actually what takes this XML and creates our page for us. It's written for us by the framework. And if we go to definition, we can see here's the code in main page.xaml.sg.cs. But this is auto-generated code that's created for us by XAML that actually creates our application. And you can see here there's a load from XAML method, which is built into the MAUI framework, that actually goes in and reads our page, our main page.xaml, and pulls in all those XMLs and turns them into actual buttons and labels and everything else that's in here. So all these eventually become objects created from the label class, the image class, the vertical stack layout class, the scroll view class. All of these actually represent classes. The scroll view class has a collection of controls, and these controls, all these components inherit from a base class, probably called something like control or something like that. And each of these, and then these are all the properties associated with that class and the settings they have for this object. So you can think of the XML as just an object representation for what shows up on our page. And rather than writing code to say, you know, label, my label equals new label, and then setting all the properties, we have this XML page to generate that for us. And our main page with initialized component does all of those instantiations for us. And so when we create the application, this gets done for us, and then we just need to add our, but one of the things we do is we add our events. And so you can see here in this button, there is a clicked event defined here, and it's identifying on counter clicked as the event that should happen when you click on that button. So we could write any event we wanted here, and this delegate is identified here to be executed when that button is clicked. So let's modify this, and we want to create a to-do form. So we're going to need a class to represent our to-do items, and so I'm going to add a folder to put my object, and I'm going to call this entities. And inside of here, I'm going to add a new folder called models. And inside of this models folder, I'm going to add a class called to-do item. So why do I put this folder structure in? This will become more apparent over time, but I like to have a nicely organized structure for where I put my object class, or my classes that represent my domain. And so here I'm going to make this a public class called to-do item, and I'm going to I like using goods as my ID fields, so I'm going to use a good, which is a generalized unique ID. It's a random unique ID so that every one of my to-do items will have its own unique ID. And then I'm going to put a title and a description, and then maybe a Boolean for is done, and then maybe a date time for completion date. And then this will initialize to false. You'll notice that you get these warnings. Non-null title must contain a non-null value when exiting a constructor. Well, one way to deal with that is say, you know what, we can make this nullable. So I'm going to make these nulls. So null will mean that, you know, we're waiting for an input to have. Good ID doesn't need to have a nullable value. We can actually we could initialize it to a new good ID, but I actually think I'm just going to I'm going to, there's an empty good, which is all zeros essentially. So I'm going to start it off with an empty. And eventually we'll be putting this into a database. So we'll just start them off with empties for now. And so this is my to-do item. I'm going to clean this up. There's a remove and sort usings method here, which we can use to clean this up. And I'm going to put in a documentation comment. Oops, wrong language. That's represents a single item in a to-do list. Maybe I'll put in my date. By the way, if you do a lot of things, a trick you can do is just drag them over there. And then they can be inserted wherever you want them. I'm going to rename this file header. And then and so in the future I can just do this. And since I'm going to have to put in the date myself, purpose, I'm going to have to create. And that, I'll just do this actually, make it more generic. And that just depends. If you were working with a company, you might put a copyright notice in that. But okay, so we've got this. And that's my to-do item. So let's see. I'm going to go to my main page, XAML, and my backup page. And I guess the way I want to modify this is I'm going to have a to-do item property here instead of this, and we'll take this stuff out. And what I want to do is I want to put in for each of these attributes, I want to have something that, so I'll want to have a title. And I'm going to see what happens if I just do this. Just to keep it simple initially. I know I'm going to want a button later on. And we have a toolbox, so let's see. We want, actually let's drag a label and see what it gives us for, yeah, that gives us, that is the basic. And then I want an entry. And let's just see what this looks like. Okay, so we're on track here. And so we'll need a bunch of these pairs. So we need a title, a description, here we're going to want is done. We don't want an entry for that. We're going to want a checkbox. And I didn't see it there, so I looked up in the documentation for MAUI. And let's see. Here's the documentation on checkbox. And I think I'm going to want something like this. Let's see, it's done. And then completion date. Let's see, label. We'll throw a date picker in there. And we'll run that and see what that looks like. So we've got a checkbox, we can pick a date, we can put a title, put a description. Fortunately, description, I can't put carriage returns in here. So I would like a multi-line thing for the description. So an entry doesn't look good for description. Let's see what an editor does for us. That looks interesting. Let's see what types. So there's a bunch of properties you can set. You can click down here. The other way you can view the properties is over this way. And so we can arrange the properties by name. Let's see. Let's see if we have some options here that we can use. And so I'm going to look up in the documentation for .NET MAUI, we have editor. And it explains it allows us to enter and edit multiple lines of text. We have auto size, change to size to accommodate user input. By default doesn't auto size, and then there's text alignment options. There's a lot of different options in here. I'm going to try this auto size option. So let's go to the editor and say auto size is equal to, And we see here in our IntelliSense, it tells us disabled or text changes. So let's do that. I'm going to save this and then run it. And now this is the behavior I want. I can write multiple things and it will increase automatically in size. So yeah, so we have a form, and now we just need to be able to click me and get the values out of here. Okay, so now we need to go, we want to have something happen when this button clicks. Right now we're not able to do much. So what we want to have happen is we want to create a to-do item from the form data. And so I'm going to start off just keeping it simple. I'm going to say to-do item equals a new to-do item. And I'm going to say the title. So if we look at our class here, that's one of the fields. Well, how do we get that title? Well, what we need to do is, if we look at this entry, we need some way of grabbing it, and the way to get it is to get we need to set the name property. And I'm going to call this, I like the names to be related to what they are. So I'm going to call it title entry. And actually, we're going to do it this way. I'm going to say entry title. And we'll see why in a second. And if you forget about how to do that, if you look down here, let's see, do they provide it to me? Okay, they don't make it easy. So each one of these, I'm going to put in description, and then this one looks like they prefer this format, so I'm going to use what they use by default. So each of these now has a name, and if I go into here now, I should be, so I want the title from an entry, so if I type entry, There it is, entry title.text. And then we can say, then we can work through all of these. So description is equal to the editor description, and is done will be equal to checkbox is done dot, and we got to figure out which one we want. That's what I want, is checked. And then my to-do item dot completion date is going to be equal to, let's see, what do I have here? Date picker. You can also come over here and copy and paste. Sometimes that's easiest. Looks like if you make a change, you may need to do a build. Let me look up date picker, and let's see if we can find an example. That's creating it. Okay, here it is, date. That's the property we want. So if I click on here, there we go, that property. So we're using right now we're using the names. If we set a name for an X comma name for our attribute or our control, we can use different properties for those different types of controls to get the value out, and then we can store that in our object. And so just to see that happen, I'm going to put a stop point here and run in debug mode. And then I'm going to click this, and let's see what happens. So if I step through this, we made a new to-do item. If I look at it right now, it's got all the defaults. So it's got all these settings are right now to their defaults. And then I'm going to look, if you can see here, we can already see what the things I typed in are available through these properties. So if I through this, I can see that now to-do item got that title that I typed. Step over again. The to item now has the description I typed. Step over again. So now it's pulling all of these things from the controls into my class object. And at the end, I end up with to-do item having all of the settings. Now we didn't set the ID. We could do that. And what we could do with that one is we could say to-do item dot ID is equal to, and to make a new GUID, you can just say new GUID. It doesn't need to toString it. This will create a brand new GUID. And so if I run it this time, there it is, empty. I step over, and now we've created a GUID. This is just a randomized value that gives it a unique ID. And as I go through each one of those, we can see that each of these fields were filled from the entries I put in. So that's how we can get our class object loaded from the form. Now what do I want to do with this? Well, I guess it depends on what I want to do with this. Maybe what I'll do is, for now, I'll just make a toString. And I'll just return, maybe all we need for our toString is we will format a string that says title and its completion status. Maybe that's enough. And so we need some place to display that. Maybe we'll just put underneath this button. We'll start this off with we'll just say, hey, please click on this button. And we'll change this name to maybe submit button. I'm going to change this to on submit clicked, which means that because I changed it, this needs to also change. And what we'll do at the end here is to show something on, and again, doesn't know what this is, we need to do a build. Then it'll know what it is. And we'll just set the text property equal to our to-do item dot toString. And now we have and you see our little notice shows up here. There's our label. We click that. It makes our to-do item. There we go. And then I'm just going to hit continue. And it says do laundry, and yes, it was done. If I click that, so we can make different items, and actually each time it's making an item, but it's not updating anything. And that will be something to look at in the future. But for right now, this is how we can make a basic form that we can fill information in and then get information out of. Thank you very much.